I am Sergeant Selena Hart, 24 years old, and the only daughter, the public pride, of Senator Alistair Hart. That night, when my jaw nearly shattered under my father's fist, because I dared to dream a dream of my own, my mother just stood there, looked at me, and said in an ice-cold voice, "Look what you've done. You got what you deserve, you useless thing." My father growled, "Maybe now you'll learn to keep that filthy mouth of yours shut." Blood seeped between my teeth, but I smiled. They had no idea what was coming. If you're watching this video, please let me know where you're from in the comments. Hit the like button and subscribe. My story might just save someone else. The argument had started, as it always did, in my father's study. It was a room designed to intimidate, a shrine to American power built in the heart of Georgetown. The air was thick with the scent of old leather, expensive bourbon, and the faint, ghosting aroma of his celebratory cigars. Behind his massive mahogany desk, a photo of him shaking the president's hand gleamed in a heavy silver frame. To its right, the American flag my grandfather had been buried with sat perfectly folded inside a cherry wood display case, a sacred relic he had co-opted for his own mythology. He was swirling amber liquid in a crystal glass, the ice clinking softly, the only sound in the room besides my own ragged breathing. "Officer candidate school is not a discussion, Selena. It's a delusion," he said, his voice deceptively calm. It was the voice he used on television, the one that reassured millions and terrified me. "I've served for 5 years, Dad. I've earned this. It's my path." My voice was steady, a discipline learned in the field, not in this house. He let out a short, bitter laugh. "You haven't earned anything I haven't allowed. You are a Hart. Your path is the one that benefits the name. You will serve your time, you will be honorably discharged, and you will work for the foundation. You will be a pretty face on a brochure, a feel-good story for my constituents. That is your purpose." Every word was a carefully placed stone, building a wall around my life. I looked past him, at the flag in the box. My grandfather, Colonel Robert Hart, had never backed down. Neither would I. "I am a sergeant in the United States Army before I am a Hart," I said, the words tasting like freedom and treason all at once. That's when the calm shattered. He moved faster than I'd seen him move in years. The crystal glass hit the desk with a sharp crack, and his hand, the one that had signed legislation and held Bibles, balled into a fist. It wasn't just anger in his eyes, it was outrage. It was the fury of a king whose favorite possession had just talked back. The impact was a blinding flash of white light and a sickening wet crunch. The sound was inside my head, a dry crackle of bone and cartilage. My head snapped back, and the world tilted sideways. I remember the bizarre detached thought, "He's going to stain the carpet." Then the cold, hard reality of the Italian marble floor slammed into my cheek, and the pain exploded. It was a hot, searing agony that radiated from my jaw through my entire skull. The metallic taste of blood, coppery and warm, filled my mouth instantly. For a moment, there was only the pain and the shocking cold of the floor. Then, I heard the click of heels on the marble. Not rushing to help. A slow, deliberate approach. My mother, Genevieve, came into my blurry field of vision. She stood over me, a silhouette of tailored silk against the library lamps. She looked down, not with horror, not with concern, but with a flat, chilling disappointment. "Look what you've done," she said, her voice a frozen whisper. "You deserved it, you useless thing." The words hit me harder than the fist. The punch was an act of rage. Her words were a verdict, a confirmation of a lifetime of feeling worthless. Then came the final, soul-crushing humiliation. She lifted her foot, shod in a ridiculously expensive Manolo Blahnik heel, and nudged my shoulder with its pointed toe. It wasn't a kick. It was worse. It was the way you'd poke something dead on the side of the road. "Get up," she ordered, her voice laced with disgust. "Don't get blood on the rug. It's a Persian." In that moment, lying on the floor of my father's temple of power, I understood with perfect, horrifying clarity. My value in this house was less than that of a decorative carpet. Something inside me didn't just break, it vaporized. The part of me that had always craved their approval, the little girl who just wanted her parents to be proud, She died right there on the cold marble. And in her place, a soldier got to her feet. I didn't say a word. I pushed myself up, my whole body screaming, the room spinning. I held their gazes for a second, seeing nothing but contempt. Then I turned and walked out, leaving a small dark red droplet on the pristine floor. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked up the grand, curving staircase to my room, each step a measured, agonizing movement. Once inside, I locked the door. My training took over, a checklist running through the fog of pain. Assess the situation. I went into my bathroom and flipped on the vanity lights, flooding the space in a bright, clinical glare. I leaned into the mirror. The person looking back wasn't me. It was a casualty. My left cheek was already a grotesque, swelling mask of purple and red. My lip was split, and blood trickled from the corner of my mouth. I didn't see a victim. I saw a soldier who had been ambushed in hostile territory. Secure the perimeter. The locked door was enough for now. Establish communication. But first, document everything. With the precision of an intelligence analyst creating a case file, I took out my phone. My hands were shaking, but my purpose was absolute. I opened the camera. I took pictures of my face from every angle, capturing the swelling, the split lip, the blood. Then I switched to video. I hit record, held the phone up, and spoke, my voice a low, unnervingly steady monotone. Sergeant Selena Hart, 22:14 hours, assaulted by target, Alistair Hart. I saved the file, uploading it to a secure, encrypted cloud server I'd set up years ago for emergencies. This wasn't just a family fight anymore. This was an evidence log. Finally, I opened my contacts and scrolled to a single letter, K. I pressed the call button. There would be no greeting, no explanation. Only the code we'd established for the worst-case scenario, the kind of situation you pray you'll never face. She answered on the first ring. Hex, this is Hart, I said, my voice clear and cold. Protocol, empty quiver. There was a half-second of silence on the other end, the sound of a professional mind processing the unthinkable. Empty quiver was a military term for a lost or stolen nuclear weapon. It was our code for the ultimate danger. Kira's voice came back, all business, stripped of any emotion but efficiency. Understood. En route. ETA 15 minutes. Disable all trackers. Fall back to Rally Point Bravo. The line went dead. The extraction had begun. Kira's apartment in Arlington, Virginia, was the polar opposite of my father's house. It was small, lived in, and a little chaotic, with stacks of books on cybersecurity threatening to avalanche onto the floor and a half-disassembled computer rig on her dining table. It smelled like coffee and ozone. It was the safest place I'd ever been. She had guided me to her worn-out leather couch, her movements efficient and silent. She didn't fuss or offer empty platitudes. She just disappeared into her kitchen and came back with a bottle of Tito's vodka, 2 clean shot glasses, and a bag of frozen peas wrapped in a dish towel. She placed the makeshift ice pack gently against my throbbing jaw, then set the bottle and glasses on the coffee table between us. Drink, she said, her voice low. She was second-generation Russian-American, and her words were always direct, stripped of unnecessary fluff. Or don't. But I'm here. That was it. No, are you okay? No. What happened? Just the quiet, solid presence of a soldier standing watch with another. That simple gesture meant more to me than 1,000 words of comfort ever could. I stared at the bottle, the clear liquid looking like truth serum. The throbbing in my face was a dull, constant drumbeat, a physical reminder of the final, ugly crescendo of a war that had been raging my entire life. Kira sat in the armchair opposite me, watching me, her eyes missing nothing. Finally, she broke the silence, her question cutting through the haze of my pain like a laser. Why now, Hart? She asked, her voice quiet but insistent. Why not all the other times? Her question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. And it opened a door inside me, a door I had kept bolted shut for years, leading back into the darkness of the past. The memories weren't just memories, they were exhibits in a long, secret trial. A map of scars that had been drawn on my soul, one agonizing line at a time. My mind drifted back to Christmas, the year I turned 18. The whole Hart clan was gathered in the formal dining room, a scene straight out of a magazine, with glittering crystal and the scent of roast turkey and pine. I had been vibrating with excitement, holding on to a secret I was bursting to share. I had received my early acceptance letter to the United States Military Academy at West Point. It wasn't just an acceptance, it was a validation of everything I had worked for, a golden ticket to a life of purpose. When my father called for a toast, I saw my chance. I stood up, my heart pounding, and announced my news. For a moment, there was a stunned silence. Then, my father slowly lowered his champagne flute. He didn't look at me. He turned his head and looked at my mother, a strange, cold smile playing on his lips. "You see, Genevieve," he said, his voice carrying across the table. "I told you she'd never get into the Ivy League." The air was sucked out of the room. My achievement, my moment of triumph, was instantly reframed as a failure. My mother, ever his loyal lieutenant, chimed in with a light, dismissive laugh. "Don't worry, darling," she said, patting his arm. "Senator Davis's daughter just got into Yale. We can just tell everyone Selena wanted to serve her country." They turned my life's greatest accomplishment into a consolation prize, a convenient piece of political spin. I sat down, the turkey turning to ash in my mouth. No one congratulated me. They just moved on, talking about a ski trip to Aspen, leaving me to bleed out emotionally at the dinner table. They hadn't just diminished my success, they had stolen it. Then another memory surfaced, sharp and acidic. I was 16, crying in my bedroom after my first real breakup. The pain felt epic, world-ending, as it always does at that age. I sought out my mother, needing comfort, needing a sign that my feelings mattered. I found her in her walk-in closet, a space larger than my first barracks room, admiring herself in a floor-length mirror. She was trying on a shimmering Oscar de la Renta gown for some political gala. She saw my tear-streaked face in the reflection and sighed, a sound of pure annoyance. "Men don't like weakness, Selena," she said, turning back to adjust the dress on her shoulder. "Perhaps if you weren't so sensitive, he wouldn't have left. Now, pull yourself together. You're ruining my mood." That was the lesson. My pain was an inconvenience. My emotions were a character flaw. My heartbreak was my own fault. I learned to swallow my tears, to bury my feelings so deep they fossilized. I learned that in the Hart family, there was no room for a daughter's broken heart, only for a senator's perfect image. But the deepest cut, the one that still ached with a phantom pain, was about my grandfather. Colonel Hart was everything my father pretended to be. A man of true honor, a decorated Marine, a warrior with a gentle heart. Before he died, when he was frail and hooked up to machines, he had gripped my hand. His knuckles bony, but his grip surprisingly strong. "You have the heart of a fighter, kid," he'd rasped, his eyes clear and fierce. "Don't you ever let anyone extinguish that fire." My father was standing in the doorway. He heard every word. After the funeral, after we had received the folded flag and listened to the lonely sound of taps, I took my grandfather's medals, which he had left to me. I kept them in a small wooden box on my dresser. They were my connection to him, a tangible reminder of his faith in me. A week later, the box was gone. I found my father in his study, placing the medals into a new, larger display case, arranging them alongside other family heirlooms. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Grandpa gave those to me." He didn't even look up. "These belong in the family collection, Selena," he said, his tone final. "They are artifacts of our legacy, not toys for a little girl to play with." He hadn't just taken some pieces of metal and ribbon. He had deliberately and systematically tried to erase my inheritance. He took the last words of a dying hero, the one person who truly saw me, and locked them away in a glass case, turning a promise into a museum piece. He was trying to extinguish the very fire my grandfather told me to protect. Back in Kira's apartment, the ice from the frozen peas was melting, dripping cold water onto my uniform. I hadn't realized I was crying. Silent tears were tracking paths through the grime and dried blood on my face. It wasn't just the punch. It had never been just one thing. It was 1,000 tiny cuts, a lifetime of being told in a million different ways that I was not enough. That punch was just the moment the dam finally broke. The tears from the night before had dried, leaving a salty tightness on my skin. Inside, something had crystallized. The grief was still there, but immense pressure had forged it into something hard and sharp. Purpose. My father had taken my grandfather's medals to erase my legacy. He wouldn't get to erase my future. The Hart family system of justice was broken, so I would turn to the only one I still trusted: the United States Army's. By morning, Kira's spare bedroom was a command center. I'd found a detailed street map of Washington, D.C. at a 24-hour CVS and taped it to the wall. A paper battlefield. The dull ache in my jaw was a constant metronome, counting down the seconds I had to act. This was no longer a daughter's desperate escape. This was a military operation. I began to populate the map with colored pushpins, my movements precise. A red pin for my father's Senate office, a black one for the Capitol Hill Club, where he cut deals, yellow pins for the homes of his key political allies. I was using my intelligence training to map the target network, identifying nodes of power and potential vulnerabilities. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a strategist. "What's the first move, Sergeant?" Kira asked from the doorway, holding 2 mugs of black coffee. "We weaponize the truth," I said, taking a mug. The hot ceramic felt good in my cold hands. But through the proper channels, I need to talk to my CO. Kira nodded, already at her workstation. "Captain Vance, I'll set up an encrypted channel. Give me 5. While she worked, I focused my thoughts. I had to present this not as a family drama, but as a potential crime affecting a member of Captain Vance's unit. Kira gave me a thumbs up. I sat down, put in an earpiece, and took a deep breath. "Captain Vance," I began, my voice formal and steady. "Sergeant Hart, your location?" His voice was crisp, concerned. I was technically AWOL. "Sir, I'm in a safe, undisclosed location. I'm contacting you to report a situation that requires immediate guidance. I have evidence that a sitting member of Congress has physically assaulted an active duty soldier." I paused, letting the words sink in. "Furthermore, I have reason to believe he is using his position to improperly influence and obstruct that soldier's military career. I respectfully request guidance on how to proceed with the Judge Advocate General's Corps." I had laid out the facts like a legal brief, never saying, "my father," or "he hit me." I used the cold, official language of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. There was a long silence. I could almost hear the gears turning as he processed the implications. This wasn't a domestic dispute. This was a potential high-level scandal. "Understood, Sergeant," he finally said, his tone shifting to serious. "Stay where you are. Maintain radio silence. I will make a call. Expect contact from a representative of the JAG office within 24 hours. The line cut. The first domino had been pushed. A wave of relief washed over me, immediately followed by a cold dread. I had just officially declared war. The counterattack came faster than I expected, and it wasn't a fist. It was a quiet, digital execution. An hour later, I tried to order a pizza online. My debit card was declined. I tried again. Declined. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. I logged into my Bank of America account. A stark red banner flashed across the screen. "Account frozen due to suspicious activity." He hadn't even needed to call me. He just picked up the phone, spoken to some vice president who owed him a favor, and with a few words, he had cut my financial lifeline. The account was a joint one, set up when I was a teenager, a leash I had never realized was still around my neck. He was trying to starve me out, to make me so desperate I'd have to come crawling back. The isolation was suffocating. He was a ghost, an invisible force that could close any door. I stared at the screen, the reality of my situation crashing down. I was a soldier with no resources, a fugitive with no money. Kira saw the look on my face. She walked over, glanced at the laptop, and her expression hardened. She said nothing. She just walked to her purse, pulled out her wallet, and took out her personal American Express card. She placed it firmly on the table, in front of me. "Use it," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. gas, food, whatever you need. We're a team. We'll settle the debt after we've won the war. Her loyalty was a shield, the logistical support my one-woman operation desperately needed. I looked at the credit card, a simple piece of plastic that represented a trust my own family had never shown me. The next day, the call came from a secure number. A woman's voice, professional and direct. Major Isabel Rosie, JAG Corps. She gave me a time and an address for a meeting, a nondescript office building near Fort McNair. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in my most formal uniform. The office was exactly what I expected. Government-issue gray carpet, functional metal furniture, and the faint smell of burnt coffee. It was a world away from the polished mahogany and smug power of my father's study. Major Rossi looked like she ate regulations for breakfast. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her eyes sharp and intelligent. She didn't shake my hand, just gestured to the chair opposite her desk. She had me recount the events, her face impassive. I delivered the report with the same clinical detachment I'd used with Captain Vance. When I was finished, she was silent for a long time, her fingers steepled under her chin. Then she looked up. Her sharp eyes didn't focus on my face, but directly on the still livid bruise discoloring my jaw. "I don't care who your father is, Sergeant," she said, her voice clear and hard as steel. "In this office, you are a soldier in the United States Army, and you are a soldier who needs protection. Now, let's start from the beginning, and this time, don't leave anything out." For the first time in my entire life, I felt like someone in a position of authority was actually on my side. It wasn't victory. It wasn't even the beginning of the battle. But it was a flicker of light in the suffocating darkness. It was a single, invaluable asset on the battlefield. It was hope. I sat frozen in the government issue chair, the echo of Major Rossi's final words hanging in the sterile air. A soldier who needs protection. For 24 years, I'd been a daughter who needed protection and never received it. Now, a stranger in a uniform was offering me the one thing I'd always been denied. Major Rossi was a woman of action. She reached for her desk phone, her movements sharp and decisive. She didn't just listen, she believed me. "First things first, Sergeant," she said, her eyes fixed on mine. "We're going to establish a wall. There's a tool called a military protective order, an MPO. It's a lawful order, signed by a commander, that will prohibit Senator Hart from contacting you or coming near you on any military installation. On base, the Army is your fortress. We're going to make sure its walls are high." My breath hitched. A fortress. The word was so powerful, so alien. My home had been a battlefield. This woman was offering me a sanctuary. Then she picked up the receiver, dialing an extension. "This is Major Rossi with the JAG Corps. Connect me to the Provost Marshal's office at Fort Belvoir, please." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Yes, this is Major Rossi," she said, her voice ringing with authority. "I need to make a preliminary report. I have a sergeant in my office who is being threatened by a high-profile family member." She paused, then delivered the payload, her words clear and precise. "I want an official record started. The soldier's name is Sergeant Selina Hart. The name of the subject is Senator Alastair Hart." Hearing her say his name, not as a title, but as the subject of a complaint, was like a pressure valve releasing inside my chest. For the first time, the truth wasn't just my secret, it was real. It was on the record. It was spoken aloud by someone who mattered. A single, hot tear escaped and slid down my cheek. When the call was done, Rossi stood up. "You've been through enough for one day. You shouldn't be alone. Let me buy you lunch." I was too stunned to argue. She drove us into Old Town Alexandria, pulling up to a classic American diner, the kind with red vinyl booths and a comforting clatter of plates. It was called the Old Guard Diner, filled with a mix of locals and a handful of older men wearing hats that identified them as veterans. We slid into a booth. The air smelled of coffee and frying bacon. It was the most comforting smell in the world. We didn't talk about the case. She asked me about my unit, my training. It was normal. The waitress took our order, 2 cheeseburgers, fries, and 2 Cokes. Simple. Real. As we ate, I noticed an elderly man sitting alone at a nearby table. He wore a faded Vietnam veteran cap and had been watching us quietly. He saw the dark, ugly bruise on my jaw. His eyes, full of a history I could only imagine, met mine. He didn't stare. He just gave me a slow, deliberate nod. A nod of recognition, of respect. When he got up to leave, he stopped at the cash register, speaking quietly to the waitress and gesturing with his head in our direction. A few minutes later, she came back to our table. "Just so you know, hun," she said with a soft smile, "the gentleman who just left took care of your check. Said to thank you for your service." I was speechless. My throat tightened and my eyes burned. A complete stranger had shown me more kindness in a single, silent gesture than my own father had in my entire life. That simple act of generosity from a fellow soldier was so profoundly decent it almost broke me. It's funny how the smallest act of kindness from a stranger can feel like a lifeline when you're drowning. It makes you feel seen. If you've ever had a moment like that where a stranger's simple gesture changed your entire day, please support this story by hitting the like button and let me know in the comments with a simple yes. It means more than you know. When Major Rossi dropped me back at Kira's apartment, the feeling of hope had solidified into something real. It grew stronger when we walked inside. Captain Vance was there, sitting on the couch with Kira. He stood up the moment he saw me. He wasn't in uniform, just jeans and a polo shirt, but he carried the same air of quiet authority. He had brought a military-grade encrypted laptop and a duffel bag with some of my personal effects from the barracks. He didn't offer platitudes. He just looked me in the eye and placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "Sergeant," he said, his voice firm and unwavering, "you did the right thing. You don't have to carry this alone. We are your unit. We are your unit." The words settled deep in my bones. I looked around the small, cluttered living room. Kira, my best friend, my digital guardian angel. Major Rossi, my legal counsel, my shield. Captain Vance, my commanding officer, my steady anchor. This wasn't a collection of individuals. This was a team, my squad, my real family. The family you choose. That night, however, I was reminded that the enemy was regrouping. An email landed in my new, secure inbox. It wasn't from my mother's personal account. That would be too traceable. It was from the public relations address of a children's literacy charity she chaired. The subject line read, "Regarding the health of our daughter." My blood ran cold. I opened it. The message was a masterpiece of corporate speak and veiled threats, clearly drafted by expensive lawyers. It spoke of my recent emotional difficulties and how the family was united in our commitment to providing her with the support she needs during this challenging time. It was a brilliant, insidious attack. They weren't denying what happened. They were reframing it. They were laying the groundwork to paint me as unstable, unreliable, and hysterical. They were trying to discredit their witness before she could even take the stand. The war wasn't just going to be fought in a courtroom. It was going to be a war of narratives, a battle for the truth itself. And they had just fired the first shot. The hope I'd felt was a fragile, newborn thing. It didn't take long for the shadows of my old life to try and snuff it out. The email from my mother was the opening salvo in a new kind of war. A psychological siege designed to breach the walls my new family had just begun to build. The three of us, me, Kira, and Major Rossi, were gathered around the encrypted laptop in Kira's living room, which now permanently smelled of stale coffee and determination. We treated the email not as a letter, but as enemy intelligence. "She's smart," Kira said, her fingers flying across the keyboard, tracing the email's path. "Or her lawyers are, sent from a third-party server registered to the charity. Harder to prove direct intent to harass." Major Rossi leaned in, pointing a pen at the screen. Her face was grim. "And the language is the key. Look here, emotional difficulties. Providing her with the support she needs. This is a preemptive strike, Sergeant. They're building a legal foundation to declare you mentally incompetent and unreliable witness. This isn't a mother's plea. This is a strategic move in a very big chess game." A cold dread trickled down my spine. They weren't just trying to get me back. They were trying to erase my credibility, to turn my truth into the ravings of a troubled girl. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. The caller ID was a name that made my breath catch: General Mark Peterson, a retired four-star general my father served on a committee with, a man I respected deeply. My first instinct was that he'd heard and was calling to offer support. My second, colder instinct screamed that it was a trap. I looked at Kira and Rossi. "It's General Peterson." Rossi's eyes narrowed. "Answer it. Put it on speaker." I swiped the screen, my thumb trembling slightly. "General Peterson, sir." But the voice that answered was not the general's. It was the smooth, practiced baritone of my father, oozing a sickeningly false concern. "Selina, darling, thank God. Your mother and I have been worried sick." My stomach churned. He had used a respected man's number to bypass my defenses. "Mom hasn't eaten or slept," he continued, his voice thick with manufactured emotion. "You're listening to outsiders, people who don't understand our family. Just come home, sweetheart. We can fix this." I said nothing. The silence stretched, a taut wire of defiance. I could hear his breathing, and I knew the mask was about to slip. His tone changed, the warmth evaporating, replaced by a chilling edge of steel. "Don't make me do things we'll both regret, Selina," he hissed, his voice low and menacing. "I built you. I can just as easily destroy you. Don't test me." He hung up. The threat lingered in the air like poison gas, but the main assault was yet to come. 2 days later, a courier delivered a package. It was a heavy, elegantly wrapped box. My name was written on the tag in my mother's perfect, flowing script. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a leather-bound photo album. On top of it, a handwritten letter on her thick, cream-colored personal stationery, the kind with her initials embossed in gold. My hands shook as I opened it. "My dearest Selina," it began. "Do you remember these days, when you were my sweet little girl? Before you became so hard, so ungrateful." My eyes scanned the album. There I was, a gap-toothed 7-year-old on a pony in Martha's Vineyard. There we were, a perfect family smiling in front of a giant Christmas tree. Each photo was a carefully curated piece of propaganda, a testament to a happy childhood that had never really existed. They were weapons disguised as memories. I went back to the letter, my vision blurring. "Your father has sacrificed everything for you. He has given you a life anyone would dream of. And this is how you repay him? By shaming him? By trying to ruin everything he has built? You are breaking his heart, Selina. You are killing your mother." The final line was a dagger. "You are killing your mother." It was the ultimate emotional blackmail, a tactic she had perfected over years, designed to trigger the deep-seated guilt she had programmed into me. And for a moment, it worked. The soldier in me vanished, and the broken little girl took her place. A wave of nausea and self-loathing washed over me. Was she right? Was I the monster? The ungrateful daughter destroying her family? The carefully constructed walls of my resolve began to crumble. The words on the page were like acid, eating away at my determination, leaving only a familiar, suffocating shame. I didn't realize I was gasping for air until Kira's hand was on my shoulder. She had been watching me, her face a mask of cold fury. She didn't try to comfort me. She acted. She reached down and took the photo album from my trembling hands, closing it with a decisive snap. "This is not a memory," she said, her voice sharp and certain. "This is ammunition, and you are not going to let it hit you." She took the letter, folded it, and held it out. "This is not a mother's letter. This is evidence of coercion and emotional manipulation. We're giving it to Rossi." She then went to the kitchen and came back with a glass of cold water. "Drink," she commanded gently. "Breathe. Remember your training. You are a soldier under psychological attack. Analyze the threat. Don't become the casualty." Her words were a bucket of ice water, shocking me out of the emotional spiral. She was right. This was a tactic. The album, the letter, the phone call, they were all coordinated attacks, designed to exploit a known vulnerability, the part of me that still, foolishly, wanted to be their daughter. I took the water, the cold glass steadying my hand. I looked at the closed album on the table. It was just an object. The letter was just paper and ink. They only had the power I gave them. In the soldier's creed, There's a line: I will never leave a fallen comrade. In that moment, I realized the fallen comrade I'd been about to abandon was myself, the scared, broken girl who had finally found the courage to fight back. I couldn't leave her behind now. My resolve hardened, no longer brittle, but forged stronger in the fire of their attack. They had meant to break me. Instead, they had just shown me exactly what I was fighting against. The psychological ammunition my parents had fired, the album, the letter, the threatening phone call, had been neutralized thanks to Kira. My resolve was hardening, but I still felt like a soldier in a defensive position, hunkered down in a trench, waiting for the next barrage. I didn't have to wait long. The next attack wasn't just a shell, it was a tactical nuke aimed at the very heart of who I was. It arrived the next morning, not as a phone call or a package, but on the front page of the Washington Post's lifestyle section. Kira brought her tablet into the living room, her face grim. She didn't say anything, she just handed it to me. There he was, my father, Senator Alistair Hart, standing at a podium draped in American flags. His face was a mask of contrived sorrow, a single perfect tear tracing a path down his cheek. The headline read, Senator Hart announces PTSD charity in honor of war hero father. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. I read the article, each word a physical blow. He spoke of his father, Colonel Robert Hart, as a true American hero. He talked about the silent struggles of our nation's warriors. And then came the line that made me want to vomit. As the father of a soldier currently facing her own significant mental and emotional challenges, he said, his voice reportedly breaking with emotion, I understand more than most the importance of supporting our brave service members. This foundation is my promise to them and to my own daughter that they are not alone. I stared at the screen, at the picture of my father crying his crocodile tears. He was using my grandfather's name, a name synonymous with honor and integrity, as a shield for his own monstrous behavior. He was weaponizing my pain, twisting it into a prop for his own political theater. He was taking the one pure good thing in my life, the memory of the only man who had ever truly believed in me, and desecrating it in public for his own gain. He wasn't just attacking me anymore, he was attacking my grandfather. He was dancing on his grave, and in that instant, something inside me snapped. It wasn't loud. It was a quiet, clean break. The part of me that was still afraid, the part that still hesitated, the part that still felt the sting of a daughter's pain. It was gone. Vaporized. In its place was a silence so profound, so cold, it felt like the vacuum of space. There was no more doubt, no more fear. There was only a pure, crystalline rage. I slowly lowered the tablet and stood up. The room came into sharp focus, every detail crisp and clear. Enough, I said. My voice was perfectly level, without a single tremor. It was the calmest I'd ever felt in my life. Kira and Major Rossi, who had arrived for our morning strategy session, both looked at me. They saw the change in my eyes. He just crossed the last red line, I said, my voice as cold as the marble floor in my father's study. I looked from Kira to Rossi, my gaze steady. I have given you evidence. I have given you my testimony. Now, I'm going to give you a weapon. It's time to go on the offensive. Before Rossi could voice the caution I saw forming on her lips, I walked over to my phone. My heart wasn't pounding. It was beating with a slow, steady, and powerful rhythm, like a drum beat before a charge. My training, my instincts, my very soul told me this was a move I had to make myself. I dialed his number. He answered on the second ring, his voice dripping with smug satisfaction. See, Selena, I knew you'd come around. The whole world is on my side. We can put this all behind us. I cut him off. My voice was not the voice of his daughter. It was the voice of a soldier identifying her target. Listen to me very carefully, Alistair, I said, the name feeling foreign and correct on my tongue. You are not my father anymore. You are a target. You made a fatal mistake when you used my grandfather's name. You have desecrated the memory of a better man than you will ever be, and in doing so, you have awakened something you cannot control. Now you listen to me, you little— No, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, laced with the promise of absolute destruction. You listen. I am no longer defending. I am attacking. I'm not just going to get my future back. I am going to dismantle everything you have built on a foundation of lies. I will burn it all to the ground. I hung up before he could utter another word, severing the connection. There are moments in life when you have to fight, not just for yourself, but for the honor of someone you love. It's a line that, once crossed, changes everything. If you believe in fighting for the people who matter, please support this story by hitting the like button. And in the comments, just type the first initial of the person you would go to war for. Let's fill this space with the strength of our loyalty. I turned back to Major Rossi, the fire that had been smoldering inside me, now a controlled inferno in my eyes. The transformation was complete. The frightened daughter who had cried on Kira's couch was dead and buried. Sergeant Hart, the soldier, the strategist, the weapon, was now fully in command. Major, I said, my voice ringing with newfound authority. I am ready to testify. I am ready to go public with everything. The photos, the video, the recording of his threats, the letter from my mother. All of it. I took a step closer, my gaze locked with hers. Find me the biggest, brightest stage in this city, I declared, and I will turn it into a landing zone for my own rescue and the graveyard for his career. My declaration of war hung in the air of Kira's apartment, a promise and a threat. The time for defense was over. The time for reacting was over. Now we would set the terms of engagement. We would choose the battlefield, and we would win. The shift in energy was immediate. The quiet support network of the past few days transformed into a focused, operational unit. Kira's living room was no longer a safe house. It was a bona fide war room. The map of DC on the wall was our theater of operations. We were no longer just friends helping a friend. We were a team with a mission. Major Rossi, ever the strategist, assumed the role of our legal commander. She paced the small room, outlining the legal ramifications, the potential charges, and the media strategy. We have assault, witness tampering, and now, with this foundation, a clear case for defamation and misappropriation of a veteran's legacy, she explained, her voice sharp. But the public stage is where we'll win this, not just the courtroom. Kira became our intelligence and logistics officer. Hunched over her multiple monitors, she was a whirlwind of silent, focused activity, her fingers a blur on the keyboard. She was our digital ghost, moving through the ones and zeros of the internet to gather information and secure our communications. Captain Vance, who had rejoined us, was our senior military advisor. He provided the crucial link to the world I came from, offering insights into the Army's perspective and leveraging his network to support our cause from the inside. And me? I was the operation commander. The final decision on every move was mine. For the first time in my life, I wasn't taking orders from my father or reacting to my mother's manipulations. I was giving the orders. I was in control. The feeling was terrifying and exhilarating. All right, team, let's get to it, Rossi said, clapping her hands together. Our target has given us a gift. We need to find the perfect time and place to open it. What's his next big public appearance? Kira didn't even look up from her screen. Already on it, he's the keynote speaker at the annual Patriots Legacy Fundraising Gala, 2 weeks from tonight. She spun one of her monitors around to face us. A glossy web page filled the screen, featuring a smiling photo of my father and mother. Rossi leaned in, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. And the venue? The National Museum of American History, Kira answered. Main atrium. All the major DC press will be there. Every big money donor, every lobbyist, every political power player in a 500-mile radius. Rossi looked at me. There it is, Sergeant. That's your stage. The biggest and brightest in the city. We all knew it instantly. It was perfect. The irony was almost poetic. My father's empire of lies would come crashing down in the very museum dedicated to the nation's history, surrounded by the symbols of the country he claimed to serve. That's our H-hour, I said, the military term for the designated start time of an operation feeling right on my tongue. The moment he steps up to that podium to give his speech. The plan was beginning to take shape, but I knew we needed more. My word against a powerful senator was a start, but it could still be dismissed as a bitter family dispute. We needed something to corroborate his pattern of abuse, something to show this wasn't an isolated incident. As if reading my mind, Captain Vance cleared his throat. He'd been quiet until now, observing. "There might be something else," he said, his expression serious. "Another weapon for our arsenal." We all turned to him. "Your story has been circulating quietly," he began carefully. "It's given someone else courage. A staff sergeant from the 3rd Infantry Regiment. Last year, he filed a complaint against the son of one of your father's biggest campaign donors for conduct unbecoming. A week later, the complaint vanished, and the sergeant was hit with sudden transfer orders to a remote base in Alaska. His career was effectively sidelined." My heart started to beat faster. "He was too scared to fight it then," Vance continued. "He knew who he was up against, but he heard about you. He knows you're fighting back. He's willing to provide a sworn affidavit detailing how Senator Hart used his influence to obstruct justice and retaliate against a soldier for doing his duty." The room was silent. This was a game changer. It proved a pattern. It elevated my case from a personal tragedy to an example of systemic corruption and abuse of power. I wasn't just a daughter fighting her father anymore. I was a soldier fighting for another soldier. "Get the affidavit," I said to Rossi, my voice hard as stone. "We'll add it to the file." Now, all the pieces were in place. All that was left was the infiltration plan. Kira spun back to her monitors. "The event is being managed by Capital Events, Inc. I've been looking into their network infrastructure." She brought up a complex diagram on the screen. "Their vendor portal has a security flaw. It's not a hack, it's just sloppy admin work. I can create a legitimate work order for a freelance AV technician for the night of the gala." A plan began to form in my mind, the details clicking into place like the well-oiled parts of a rifle. "You have someone you trust?" I asked. Kira smirked. "I have a whole network of people who owe me favors and don't ask questions. Our guy will be inside with full access to the sound and projection systems." The final piece was me. I would have to be there. Not as an attacker, but as the loving daughter. The prodigal child returned to the fold. "I'll attend the gala with them," I said. "On their arm. I'll be the picture of the proud, supportive daughter. They'll be so busy showing me off, they won't see the knife coming." Rossi nodded, understanding immediately. "They'll invite you on stage. It's too good a photo op for him to resist. The powerful senator, his war hero daughter, all in the name of charity." "Exactly," I confirmed. My pulse was thrumming with adrenaline. "And when he invites me to speak, I'll walk up to that podium, look out at the cameras, and I'll say my line." Kira looked at me, her eyes gleaming. "What's the signal?" "I'll thank him," I said, a cold smile touching my lips. "And then I'll say, I'd like to share a few images of the support my family has given me." And that's when our AV tech hits the button. Kira finished, her own smile matching mine. "And switches the video feed from the charity's logo to the contents of your secure server." The plan was audacious. It was dangerous, but it was perfect. We had the location. We had the time. And we had the secret weapon. The operation was a go. The main atrium of the National Museum of American History was a cavern of marble and echoes, glittering with the self-importance of Washington, D.C. Chandeliers dripped light onto a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. High above it all, suspended in a climate-controlled chamber of reverent silence, was the original Star-Spangled Banner, its ancient, fragile fabric a testament to the nation's endurance. It was under the gaze of this sacred symbol that my father had chosen to celebrate his own legacy. It was here that I would burn it to the ground. I felt like a ghost walking into my own life. Dressed in my Army service uniform, the deep blue fabric crisp and severe, the medals on my chest polished to a high gleam, I was the perfect prop. The bruise on my jaw had faded to a pale, yellowish shadow, easily concealed with a touch of makeup. To the world, I was Sergeant Selena Hart, the patriot daughter of the great Senator Alistair Hart. My parents flanked me, parading me through the crowd like a prize-winning racehorse. My father was in his element, shaking hands, clapping backs, his voice booming with false sincerity. My mother, elegant in a sequined gown, smiled a smile that never reached her eyes. They were so proud, so utterly clueless. I smiled, I nodded, I shook the hands of powerful men whose names I knew from the news. Inside, my heart was a trip hammer against my ribs, and every nerve ending was a live wire. I was an operative, deep behind enemy lines, my face a calm mask, my mind a cold, calculating machine. Finally, the moment came. The lights dimmed, and a spotlight found my father at the podium. He launched into a soaring speech, his voice resonating with practiced emotion. He spoke of family, of sacrifice, of the legacy of service his own father had passed down. He was magnificent. He was a liar. "And now," he said, his voice catching, a masterful touch of theatricality, "I want to invite to the stage the pride and joy of my life, a true American hero, my daughter, Sergeant Selina Hart." A wave of applause washed over me. Every eye in the room was on me. I walked toward the stage, each step measured and steady. I felt 1,000 lifetimes pass in that short walk. I reached the podium and stood beside him, the heat of the spotlight like an interrogation lamp. He leaned in close, the smell of bourbon on his breath, and whispered. His voice a venomous hiss meant only for me. "Say what I told you to." This was it, the hour. I stepped up to the microphone, my gaze sweeping across the sea of faces, past them to the cameras in the back of the room. I took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the silence hang for a beat too long. "Thank you, Father," I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified throughout the cavernous hall. To speak on the subject of sacrifice, I'd like to share a few images of the support my family has given me. That was the signal. Behind us, the massive projection screen that had been displaying the glittering logo of the foundation suddenly flickered and went black. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Then it flashed back to life. But it wasn't the logo. It was a picture. A high-resolution, brutally clear photograph of my face, taken the night of the assault. The grotesque swelling, the split lip, the dark, ugly purple of the bruise. A dead, profound silence fell over the atrium. It was so quiet I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Every smile was frozen, every glass was held midway to a pair of lips. Then, the image on the screen changed. It was now the video I had recorded in my bathroom. My own voice, calm and clinical, echoed through the hall, a stark contrast to the mangled face on the screen. Sergeant Selina Hart, 22:14 hours, assaulted by target, Alistair Hart. A wave of shocked murmurs swept through the crowd, but the final blow was yet to come. The screen went black again, but the speakers crackled to life. It was the audio from his phone call, digitally cleaned and amplified. My father's voice, no longer the smooth baritone of a statesman, but the low, menacing snarl of a predator, filled the room. "Don't make me do things we'll both regret, Selina. I built you. I can just as easily destroy you." The dam broke. The silence shattered into 1,000 pieces of chaos. Gasps turned into shouts of outrage. The frantic, blinding flash of cameras erupted from the back of the room, a relentless strobe light capturing the implosion of a dynasty. My father stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief, the color draining away until he was as white as the marble floor. My mother looked like she had seen a ghost, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with pure, unadulterated horror. And in that perfect, beautiful moment of pandemonium, they arrived. 2 uniformed military police officers entered from a side door, moving with a calm, unstoppable purpose. They were led by Major Isabel Rossi, her face set like stone. They didn't run. They walked directly toward the stage, parting the chaotic crowd like a ship through water. They mounted the steps. The camera flashes were now a continuous, blinding wall of light. Major Rossi stopped directly in front of my father, her presence radiating an authority that dwarfed his. She didn't shout. She didn't have to. Her voice, crisp and official, cut through the noise like a surgeon's scalpel. "Senator Hart, she said, loud enough for the nearest microphones to pick up. My name is Major Rossi with the Army JAG Corps. You are being taken into custody pending an investigation into the assault of an active-duty U.S. Army soldier. His empire was gone. His legacy was ashes. His world had ended, not with a bang, but with the quiet, decisive click of handcuffs. The explosion at the museum had been loud, chaotic, and brutally public. The aftermath was a deafening silence. The day after the gala, or the heart attack, as the media had gleefully nicknamed it, I sat on Kira's couch, watching the event play out on a loop on every news channel. The triumphant adrenaline of the night before had evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, bone-deep exhaustion. There I was, in my crisp blue uniform, a stoic soldier on the screen. There was my father, his face a crumbling mask of disbelief as the MPs led him away. It was a victory. It was a complete and total vindication. So why did I feel so empty? Kira watched me watch the news, her expression unreadable. On the screen, a talking head was analyzing my motives. Online, the comment sections were a cesspool. To half the world, I was a hero, a whistleblower, a symbol of courage. To the other half, I was a traitor, a fame-hungry, ungrateful daughter who had publicly executed her own father. The words, even from strangers, stung with a familiar venom. Kira saw me flinch. She picked up the remote and the screen went black. "Don't read it, don't listen," she said, her voice firm. "Mission accomplished, Sergeant. Now it's time for R&R, rest and recovery." But the war wasn't over. The enemy had just changed tactics. 2 days later, a call came from Major Rossi. My mother, Genevieve, had been trying to reach me through her lawyers. She wanted to talk. Against Rossi's advice, I agreed to take the call. Some part of me, a foolish, stubborn part, needed to hear what she had to say. Her voice, when it came through the phone, wasn't cold or angry. It was worse. It was wet with tears, choked with a theatrical sorrow that was as fake as the photos in her album. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask if I was okay. She begged. "Selena, please," she sobbed. "You have to stop this. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Your father, he's lost everything. His seat, his reputation, everything is gone." I listened, my own heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I waited for a single word of remorse, a hint of responsibility. It never came. "Don't you have any pity?" she cried, her voice rising in desperation. "After everything we've given you, you owe us this, Selena. You owe it to this family to fix what you've broken." And there it was. You owe us. The two words that had been the shackles around my life, the debt I could never repay. But standing there in the quiet of Kira's apartment, I realized the truth. I took a deep, steadying breath, the memories of 1,000 slights, a million moments of being made to feel small and worthless, flashing through my mind. "My debt is paid, Mrs. Hart," I said, the formal address feeling right. The word mother no longer fit. "I paid it with my youth, I paid it with my dreams, and I paid it with my blood on your Persian rug. As of this moment, I don't owe you or anyone a single thing." I ended the call and blocked the number. There was no anger, no satisfaction, just a profound, aching sadness for the mother I never had. That was the last time I ever spoke to her. The final ghost was my father. My Army-mandated therapist, a kind but no-nonsense major, suggested I see him one last time. Not for him. For me. For closure. So, a week later, I found myself walking through the sterile, echoing corridors of a federal detention center. The man I met in the visitation room was not the titan who had dominated my life. Stripped of his tailored suit and his aura of power, he looked small, older. The fight had gone out of his eyes, replaced by a sullen, resentful emptiness. He was sitting behind a thick pane of plexiglass. We spoke through a crackling intercom. He tried one last time to deploy the old weapon. "I did it all for you, you know," he said, his voice a pathetic rasp. "Everything I built." I held up my hand, a simple gesture that silenced him. The power dynamic had finally, irrevocably, shifted. "No," I said, my voice calm and even. devoid of the anger he expected. You did it all for you. I didn't come here for an apology because I know you're not capable of one. I didn't come here to gloat. I leaned closer to the glass, making sure he saw the clarity in my eyes. I came here to tell you that you have no more power over me. I'm done being afraid. I'm done being angry. I took a breath and said the words that were for me, not for him. And I forgive you. A flicker of triumph sparked in his eyes, thinking he had won. I extinguished it. Not because you deserve it, I continued, my voice soft but unyielding. You don't. I forgive you because I deserve peace, and I can't have it as long as I'm carrying around all this hate, so I'm putting it down, right here, with you. I stood up and walked away without looking back, leaving him alone with the ruins of his life. Later that afternoon, I did one last thing. I walked to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, the great black granite wall cutting a wound into the earth of the National Mall. I walked along its polished surface, my own reflection moving with me, superimposed over the endless names of the dead. I wasn't looking for anyone I knew. I just walked until I found a name. Hart. Sergeant David R. Hart. I didn't know him, his story, or his sacrifice, but he was a brother in arms, a name that connected me to a legacy of service, not of tyranny. I stood there for a long time, my fingers tracing the cold, carved letters of his name. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the key to the house in Georgetown. The one I had carried for years, a symbol of a place that was never truly a home. I held it in my palm, the metal cool against my skin. It was heavy with the weight of memories I no longer wanted to carry. I looked down at the paving stones at the base of the wall. I found a small dark crack between two of the stones, and with a quiet final exhale, I let the key drop. It disappeared into the darkness, the sound barely audible. I was letting go of the past. I was walking away, a free soldier, no longer bound by a name, or a house, or the ghosts that lived inside them. 1 year later. The key I had dropped into the cracks of the DC pavement had closed a door. Today, I was opening a new one. The Georgia sun was warm on my face, a stark contrast to the cold political shadows of Washington. It glinted off the single, polished gold bar on the collar of my uniform. Second Lieutenant Selena Hart. The name felt new. It felt right. It felt like mine. I stood at attention on the parade ground at Fort Benning, surrounded by my graduating class from Officer Candidate School. The ceremony was a blur of crisp commands, starched uniforms, and the proud, tearful faces of families in the stands. My family. I scanned the crowd and found them easily. Kira was there, trying to look stoic but failing, a huge, goofy grin on her face. Next to her was Major Vance, he'd been promoted, and Major Rossi, who had flown down from D.C. They weren't sitting in the front row reserved for VIPs. They were just there, in the thick of it, my family. The one I had chosen, the one that had chosen me back. As the commanding general spoke, I subconsciously touched the side of my jaw. The scar was still there, a faint, silvery line visible only in the right light. It no longer felt like a mark of shame. It was a medal, a silent testament to the hardest battle I had ever fought. A reminder that the deepest wounds can heal into the strongest parts of you. My first assignment as a new officer wasn't a briefing with generals or a strategic meeting at the Pentagon. It was a talk with a group of fresh-faced privates, kids barely out of high school, their faces a mixture of bravado and terror. I stood before them in a simple classroom, not as the daughter of a disgraced senator, but as their platoon leader. My story, in its sanitized, official form, had become a quiet case study on leadership ethics at West Point and other academies, a lesson on the abuse of power and the duty to protect one's subordinates. But these kids didn't need a case study. They needed a leader. I didn't tell them my story, not the details. But I told them the truth I had learned. There will be times in your career, I said, my voice quiet but carrying to the back of the room, when you will be tested, not just by the enemy, but by the very structure you are a part of. You will be asked to be silent when you should speak. You will be made to feel small when you are doing something great. I looked into their young, hopeful eyes. I am here to tell you this. Your voice matters. Your integrity matters. The most important job of a leader is not to give orders, but to listen. It is to create a space so safe that your soldiers can tell you the truth, no matter how hard that truth is. You look out for your team. You protect your people. You never, ever let your soldiers fight their battles alone. That is not a suggestion. That is an order. A few weeks later, a letter arrived for me. It was forwarded from Major Rossi's office. The envelope was plain, the return address from a university in Ohio. Inside, the letter was from the Colonel Robert Hart Memorial Scholarship Fund, the foundation I had established with every penny of the civil settlement I'd won from my father. It wasn't a foundation to burnish a false legacy, but one to build a real one. It provided scholarships for young people leaving abusive homes to pursue their education. The letter was from the fund's first ever recipient. It was written in the earnest, slightly messy handwriting of a young woman. Dear Lieutenant Hart, it read, my name is Sarah. I'm the first person in my family to go to college. I didn't think it was going to be possible. The news stories about you were everywhere last year. I know the media gets things wrong, but I saw the look on your face that night, and I recognized it. It was the same look I had in my own house. Seeing you stand up gave me the courage to leave. This scholarship isn't just paying for my books, it's paying for my freedom. You didn't just save yourself. You're saving us too. I folded the letter, my vision blurred with tears. Not tears of sadness, but of a profound, overwhelming gratitude. My father had tried to steal my grandfather's legacy, to twist it into a tool for his own lies, but he had failed. The true legacy of Colonel Hart wasn't a name on a building or a collection of medals in a glass case. It was the unextinguishable fire of a warrior's heart, and it was my honor to pass that flame on. The final scene of my old life was an ending. The final scene of my new one is a beginning, and it repeats every morning. It's 0500 hours. The air is cool and damp, the sky just beginning to blush from black to a deep indigo. I stand in front of my platoon, 40 young soldiers, their breath misting in the pre-dawn chill. Platoon! I call out, my voice sharp and clear. Fall in. They snap to attention. I look at their faces, at the trust in their eyes. Forward, march! And we begin to run. The only sounds are the rhythmic pounding of our boots on the pavement and the steady cadence of our breathing, a living, breathing machine moving as one. We run as the sun begins to crest the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of orange and pink. I look at the soldiers running with me, their faces a mixture of sweat and smiles, and I feel a sense of peace so deep it settles in my bones. I am no longer running from a dark past. I am leading them, and they are leading me, toward the future. I had found my freedom, not by escaping the army, but by becoming the very best part of it. I had learned that you don't find the light at the end of the tunnel. You fight your way through the darkness, and you make the dawn yourself. My story began in a dark, silent room, but it ends here in the light of a new day that I built for myself. If you take one thing away from my journey, let it be this. Your past does not get to write your future. You do. Your legacy is not what you inherit, but what you have the courage to create from the ashes. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, or if you know someone who needs to hear that they are not alone, please share it. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most. Subscribe for more.